Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for episode 6, the finale of the series, Engaging Communities and Stakeholders. For those who I've not met yet, my name is Lisa Mitchell. I am the President and CEO of the Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnerships. Before we get started, I would like to start off with a very big thank you to our series sponsors, Amoco, BLG, EPCOR, Fasken, Graham, and Mainline. Because of their generous support, we're able to bring this important content to life. Our goal here at the Council is to educate public owners and procurers on the P3 potential of their projects, when and where they make sense. P3s are not the right fit for every project, but they are a tried and tested solution that can work for many assets. And at a time when government funding for infrastructure is increasingly tight and the needs are great, municipalities need more tools to procure and tap into private capital and expertise. For this reason, the Council established its Municipal Engagement Advisory Group, made up of both public and private sector members who have experience using the P3 model. This group has played a key role in developing our recent municipal recommendations and the guide for the P3 guide for municipalities. In fact, several of our MEG members have been facilitating episodes of the webinar series, including today. As I mentioned, the Council released a number of municipally focused tools, which this webinar series is based off of. You can download these tools, which contain the latest information on procurement models, best practices, and new mini case studies through our QR code here on the screen, or by clicking the links that will be provided in the chat. I'm pleased to introduce today's session facilitators, each one of them bringing exceptional expertise and leadership in the P3 and infrastructure sector. First, we have Fraser Macdonald. He is a principal at Strategy Corp based in Toronto. A lawyer by training, Fraser advises on complex public policy, infrastructure development, and regulatory issues across all levels of government. He's a veteran political strategist and has managed major campaigns and led government relations mandates and stakeholder engagements on major infrastructure projects and other priority files across the country. His legal experience at international law firms in Toronto and London and Australia provides him with a sharp grasp of risk, deal structure, and stakeholder alignment. We also have joining us today Annette Manning. She's Senior Manager of Integration and Change Management for North American Commercial Services. Annette leads the onboarding of new acquisitions and P3 projects into EPCOR and supports operational readiness or demobilization alongside the project execution team. With over 25 years of experience in business development, asset optimization, and process redesign, Annette has worked across British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Arizona, supporting integration and transition efforts in municipal water and wastewater, mining, oil sands, natural gas, and electricity distribution. We also have with us Kerry Tuyen, Director of Innovation, Technology, and Alternate Delivery. Kerry is a professional engineer and has over 10 years of experience within the water sector. She has worked in various roles in both design and project execution of municipal wastewater systems across North America with Veolia WTS, formerly Suez WTS GE Water. In recent years, Kerry's also worked at Ellis Don, a large general contractor where she led the project management team in managing Ellis Don's Ontario P3 contracts. Kerry brings her background in water treatment and working experience with alternative delivery models in collaboration with various industries, technical experts, consultants, government agencies, and the public. And last but not least, we have Joe Zimmer. He's an engineering manager for project development in North American Commercial Services, who provides senior engineering and operational expertise to guide integration strategies for complex projects. He oversees commercial contract recommendations, ensures customer satisfaction, and finalizes technical performance, managing partner performance. Previously, Joe was operations manager at the Regina Wastewater Treatment Plant, joining EPCOR during the 30% design phase. Over his 9 years, he led design, construction, commissioning, and operations of both legacy and upgraded facilities. Joe's experience offers a unique perspective, having joined EPCOR as a new employee while actively collaborating with the integration team to onboard former City of Regina staff. Today's session will cover why engagement matters, pitfalls and strategic best practices, tactics, and engagement success stories. And we'll wrap up at the last half of our session with a comprehensive case study on the Regina Wastewater Treatment Facility. Today's episode is going to follow along Chapter 8 within our P3s, a guide for municipalities document, and will help to sort of bring it to life and provide tangible examples. We'll touch on the understanding of the importance of proactive stakeholder engagement, recognizing effective communication strategies, learning how municipalities can leverage digital tools, open forums, and structured dispute resolution mechanisms to improve stakeholder relations and maintain project momentum. Over the course of the next 90 minutes, we'll discuss why engagement matters, move into the tactics for engagement, and as I said, wrap up with the success story of the Regina wastewater treatment case study. But before I turn it over to the presenters, I do have one quick housekeeping note to pass along. We will be taking questions throughout. This is meant to be a learning opportunity. Everybody is open to taking your questions as they go along. So if you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, we'll be monitoring that throughout the discussion. And with that, I will now pass it over to both Kerry and Fraser. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Lisa. So hello, everyone. I guess I'll get started with the why engagement matters. If we can go to the next slide. So to kick off this webinar, we'll start off with why engagement matters in P3 projects. Obviously, in P3 projects, we have multiple stakeholders. So it is important for us on the onset of the project to make sure that everyone's engaged to build that key pillar of a successful project, which revolves around trust, transparency, and most importantly, informed decision making. You want to ensure that all your stakeholders are properly informed and provide them with the appropriate resources and opportunity to voice their concerns and have them properly addressed it as well. Next slide. So often we see that in P3s, there's a lot of public misconceptions, and that often stems from, a project communication and engagement strategy that may not have be as sophisticated or developed. What we need to understand is that engagement and communication style to stakeholders can look very different from one another. So what I'm trying to get at is there isn't really a one size fits all solution to engagement and how it should be done. And it should be dynamic. So how a P3 project team engages with like the general public versus the construction and engineering firms in the private sector side can be different, and that is okay. But the important piece to remember is to ensure that all stakeholders are properly engaged, whichever medium forums that you use throughout the project, so that informed decision making can occur. One thing to also note, as it's displayed here, is that communication and engagement doesn't happen at just the planning phase or procurement phase. It is throughout the entire project, through all phases. Ongoing updates and builds transparency, and that is how stakeholders will be engaged and make informed decisions throughout the project. So now we'll talk about some pitfalls and strategic best practices. So we talked about how important engagement and communication is, but we'll touch on some of the risks that can occur if you don't have good engagement and communication established. And when you see these kind of risks at play in projects, that's also an indication that perhaps you need to tweak your communication protocols and engagement plans. So project delays, erosion of trust, misinformation and political controversy, legal challenges. These are all kind of, I see them as snowballing effects. You'll start seeing, if you don't engage everyone, all your stakeholders at the start or throughout the project, you'll see that you have to continuously revisit designs during the design phase, revisit this decision that was made that moved the project forward. And that's probably because there was a lack of buy-in, or not every stakeholder was on the same page at the same time at that decision making process. And that kind of snowballs into then the trust, the misinformation, misunderstanding that can also lead to some challenges. So all of this is good indicators that, if you're seeing these, perhaps communication plans can be tweaked, and also why it's important to have a good communication engagement plan developed. Next slide. So some best practices for effective engagement, being transparent, making sure that when communicating with external, internal stakeholders, that project details are provided, not just the pros, but also the cons, kind of highlighting at a high level, what's happening in the project, and also making sure that materials are accessible and where they can be found. I also think that being transparent and communicating, an important element here is also understanding the type of language, or like the way presenting that information to the public there, or the stakeholder. It's going to look very different from your technical stakeholder to your general public, and it should be you should consider tweaking how communication is done to make sure that that transparency is there for all your stakeholders. Keeping council decisions open, making sure that public meetings are held live and are accessible. Stay nimble. I like to say stay flexible, and being able to adapt to kind of changing your communication plan as you need to, making sure that if one forum works better than another, be ready to pivot for that, and that's okay. And also being proactive. So a lot of project teams will have kind of like a myth busting kind of section on their project hub or website, even having a Q&A and developing questions ahead. Sometimes stakeholders may not know what they don't know, so they don't know what to ask. So having those addressed ahead of time is being proactive and kind of making sure that you get the information out there, so that no alternative understanding of the project can be developed because you're laying it all out. Next slide. But one thing we also need to talk about, we talked a lot about external stakeholders, but we should also be aware that we need to manage internal stakeholders in P3s too. And I would even say to some extent that your internal stakeholders are even more important than your external, because it is your project team, it is your internal stakeholders that actually interact with the external and provide that information. So you want to ensure that everyone's on the same page. So, some steps and some kind of tips for that is establishing like a transition program, a support program, making sure that you have workshops, one-on-one consultations, HR support for the project team, providing those regular updates, that transparency. I think transparency is both for internal and external. The more that you can provide throughout the project, the better that everyone's on the same page. And also creating a forum, just like how we do with external stakeholders, for feedback, concerns, addressing any questions, having that with internal stakeholders too, so that everyone feels part of the project. The more that your internal and external feel that they are in the project throughout all the phases and engaged, the better decision making will become, and it just helps the project overall to be a success. And next one. So this is ending this section. I think we kind of talked about how important engagement is and ongoing communications can be to make sure that the P3 success. Here are some tips as well for communication protocols to make sure that you have things laid out so that you can make sure you have a successful project. So it sounds silly, but writing out a communication protocol just is very helpful. It helps to set clear expectations up front. Even laying out, how the project team meets, what frequency, where project updates can be found, and even going through, roles and responsibility, all that forms your communication protocol, and having all that written out really helps your external and internal stakeholders to be able to access this information, and any point in time when there's confusion or anything comes up, they know exactly where to go to be able to ask their question and who to contact. And also making sure that this protocol that is developed is dynamic. It's more of an understanding here than actually writing this out. It's knowing that whatever you plan during the onset of the project, just like how projects are dynamics and they can change throughout the project cycle, same thing with communication. It will be dynamic. You may need to pivot, and being open to that and understanding as the project evolves is important. Lastly here, including a crisis communication strategy. So you may not know what all the crisis will be, but having a proactive protocol of addressing those challenges, anything that comes that hasn't been identified in your risk registry or anything, having a plan on how to tackle that, whether that be this team will be doing this, this individual lead. Having a plan of some sort is a good way to make sure that you will be able to communicate effectively. That sort of wraps up with this section, and now I'll turn it over to Fraser for tactics.
Thanks, Kerry. And I'll just lead off this section with saying, my direct experience in a lot of implementation, particularly in stakeholder management exercises, comes with a lot of battle scars. So I've seen how this can go wrong, which informs how we talk about the best practices. And this is very much not a sales pitch. It's actually an anti-sales pitch. The more you prepare early and bake in all of these plans from the start and think through how you're going to manage all of your stakeholders and be transparent and build trust, means that you're not going to hopefully have to bring in expensive consultants or people to come fix the problems later, in addition to the other risks that this entails. And so with that in mind, we can jump into what the specific tactics are. I think a good way to think about this is, once you've got your strategy and protocols in place, these tactics are all somewhat of a menu of items that you can pick from, depending on the context, depending on the stakeholders, and depending on the complexity of the project and factors like that. What I would say is, although it is a menu to choose from, once you pick your protocol and pick your engagement plan, you should treat it kind of like a tasting menu, not an a la carte buffet, because one of the most important things in all of this is to not just communicate about the project, but to communicate about the process. And what that means is being able to tell all of your stakeholders from the outset, here are the things we are going to do to make sure that you don't just feel heard, but actually are heard. And make the process itself just as transparent as the rest of the project. So I can't underscore enough how much, well, we use the phrase internally, the process protects. And what that means in practice is, whether it's a lawsuit or upset stakeholders or genuine project risks because things go sideways, a robust process that has been transparently communicated to all of the stakeholders can protect you from almost all of those issues, or at least all of those issues becoming as severe as they might otherwise be. So let's talk through a few of these items and how we sort of think about it from a best practices perspective. Open public meetings, everyone's least favorite format, because when you're on the receiving end of things, you never really quite know what you're going to get. But it's also perhaps the most satisfying to stakeholders. There's a range of ways to operate these types of meetings, but in essence, it is a town hall where anyone who is impacted can come and have their voice heard in a public setting. There are more private ones that we'll talk about in a moment, sort of focus groups and workshops, but the entire point of this is being able to say anyone who is impacted is welcome to come, is welcome to address the project proponents to their faces, whether it's virtual or in person, and have an actual conversation. And the deliverable that comes out of this as a best practice is what we refer to as what we heard report. There's different ways to phrase that, but essentially it is acknowledging all of the comments that were heard, not just listening and saying, we'll get back to you. It doesn't mean that you have to listen to every single person. Again, there's a wide range of perspectives that come in, but what it means is when you use formats like this, nobody can then come after the fact and say, I never had the chance to have my voice heard on this. And so this is the hyper-transparent version in public view. It isn't risk-free. The politicians usually don't love these items where they are defending a project. And they usually do love them when they want an opportunity to perhaps throw sand in the gears on a project. So be strategic about the use and framing. But fundamentally, these are a very good tool to ensure that, in particular, the public stakeholders get heard, or in the context of internal stakeholders, making sure that a workplace, for example, in a municipality, can all have that public conversation in front of everybody in a way where nobody's hiding anything. And that's the starting point for building trust. Um, on the more data-driven side, I guess we call this a hybrid or digital platforms. I'm thinking primarily about surveys here, and this would not be so much like a polling survey where we're trying to get quantitative data, but it's more of a qualitative survey where we're out there, whether it's connecting with people by email, social media, whatever digital channels that are sensible for the audience. This allows you to do a lot more direct interactions than, for example, a public meeting is going to have. We often do versions of this where we'll get thousands of responses. Artificial intelligence has made it a lot easier to collate those responses and turn them into, again, like a what we heard report or key summaries. But the point is, in this, much like the open meetings, you're casting the net wide and you're giving people the opportunity to feed things in largely without a filter. Sometimes you need to do a little bit of filters depending on what specific audience you're working with, but it is again, this is the wide end of the funnel, to try to make sure that everybody's getting to input things in a way that makes sure that they feel heard. That's the starting point again of the trust building. Interactive maps is another great one. So where you're dealing with things that are going to impact people's commutes, people's communities, whatever it is. We'll talk about this in the case studies in a moment. It's very difficult for people to visualize in the language of engineers and planners what things are going to look like in practice for them. And so using digital tools like an interactive map to say, this is where the highway is going to go, this is where the interchange is going to go, this is how it's going to change from where it is today. Those kinds of things are, again, very helpful to break things down to the granular level and make it easy for people to understand. And again, if you're doing these exercises and it doesn't look like you're trying to make it easy for people, you're not taking maximum advantage of the resources you're putting into the stakeholder engagement. You want people to feel like you are meeting them at their level. Another corollary point, very similar to interactive maps and digital tools for sharing information, would be things like a microsite. And so that would be a specific website just for the project, that breaks down all the details, including the consultation and stakeholder engagement process, including anything that, for example, citizens are voting on or a city council is voting on. Very specific project details about the different stages of actual construction, of funding, financial impacts, all of those things contained in one place where citizens are concerned, stakeholders are concerned. Here's the microsite. 95% of your answers are going to be there, and through that, there's also the feedback solicitation mechanism and information about things like your public meetings and your surveys. Using the media to leverage this. I guess the other problem we need to solve for here is getting the word out. So making sure that it's not, you're not just sending people emails to a list of emails you already have. That's not a good enough answer for making sure that the community is properly engaged and consulted. So how do we make sure that they know about it? One answer is, of course, local media. So going to the media and telling them this is the project that's been proposed. This is the process that we're engaging the community with. Here's the website that you can go for more information and all of your updates. And they're generally quite happy to share those things. as you probably know, these often are hot topics, and media is always looking for those things. So that's one way to do it. Social media with some degree of paid advertising might be part of the answer. Not on the list here, but actually a very useful tactic is mail outs to entire communities. So if you're impacted, you get a piece of mail. That's usually a legal or bylaw requirement in municipal government that impacted stakeholders get something in the mail. I liked using QR codes, not just websites typed out, but actually just a QR code that most people are pretty familiar with how those work now, and again send people to that microsite. And again, some of this, if you're working on the project, some of this is going to feel like overkill. It almost always feels like overkill, but it doesn't feel like overkill to the people who are impacted. You might only read the mail and not be heavily online with certain populations. You might not check your mail or throw these things out as junk mail, but receive information via social media. So you can't assume that one channel is going to get you every single stakeholder you need to talk to. And so a multi-channel conversation is necessarily going to be part of that process. And finally, and this is typically on both more technical issues and perhaps further along in the planning process, focus groups and workshops. And so this is when you have a smaller, often at least, a smaller and more defined audience, although sometimes you might take a sampling of community members at large. But this might be something like Indigenous leaders, as is listed here. It might be, a specific group of, leaders in, it might be just city councilors. It might be just financial people talking about the financial impact. But these are, again, it's not that everyone's invited to the group, but the findings and the conclusions of the conversation are almost always made public, again, to assist with transparency. And quite often, this is where a lot of good ideas about improving projects come from. One quick note on Indigenous communities. Indigenous consultation is basically a 100% requirement in any land development or infrastructure project in today's world in Canada, and that requirement's never going to go away. So those communities have particular ways that they like to be consulted and engaged with, and getting to know that and building those relationships in advance of coming in and saying, by the way, here's a great project that's going to impact you. Highly recommended. But certainly those are relationships that are fundamental to any project success and should be considered both as part of the whole, but also as individual stakeholder groups. So we've talked a little bit about the digital tools and how you can use them to drive engagement and drive awareness. So we've talked about the first one here, social media campaigns. I really like interactive dashboards as well. So this would be usually housed on the project microsite. But what it really is a dashboard showing the progress of both the consultation and the project. And it allows people to check back regularly and see what the progress is. Part of the challenge in these projects and consultations is often it's the decision to sometimes pay more or take on risk or whatever it is comes early, and the results come much later. And I think proponents too often don't share project updates and progress reports with the public in a way that makes them feel that sense of momentum, in the sense that things are moving, whether it's according to plan or behind schedule or whatever it is. Transparency on those things tends to still it be the better option, whether or not you're always sharing good news or whether project progress is as quick as you would want. Online town halls and live streaming. So we've talked about the town hall element in sort of a public consultation process. Live streaming, I mean, the best use case for this is that I can think of is actually just a webcam showing the construction, and allowing people to track over time and sort of, having milestones that people can click back to. Again, it's giving people that meaningful sense of progress. And, there's nothing that says transparency more than having a camera on 24/7, showing people what you're up to. And again, that might seem, boring or overkill or whatever people might say about it. I've never seen people regret doing this stuff, because it's fundamentally about giving people that unfiltered access to what's going on. Ultimately, whether it's their tax dollars or or future tax dollars, it's you cannot build trust if it looks like you're hiding things from people. And finally, data visualization and infographics. So here in particular on more complex P3 models that people are less familiar with, and or project and engineering concepts that people are less familiar with, breaking things down to the granular level so that the average citizen and the average stakeholder can understand and digest that material in a way that meets them at their level is very helpful. This stuff it's frankly quite hard to do, but doing it well is again a really important way to build that trust and transparency. So want to talk through a few examples. I will not go into great detail on all of these, but what I will say is off the start, what you'll see here is these are all award-winning projects for their outcomes as P3s. So they were good partnerships. They were projects that were delivered on time and on budget. They're great test cases for the P3 model to show how that sharing of risk and sharing of cost can drive good outcomes for all parties. And so that's why they were, these are all award-winning from the council projects. But the thread that is common between them is they all had strong engagement models with the public, where that community outreach was top-notch and done to a high standard. It's impossible to say whether the projects would have been as successful in the absence of that strong engagement, but I think it's quite telling that these projects and some of the other ones we'll talk about today, it's very rare. In fact, I'm not aware of any example of a really successful project that didn't also have great public engagement. So the first one here, the Regina bypass, a few highlights here on how the engagement happened. I'm not going to just read from the slides here, but the things that stand out to me, both obviously very important Indigenous consultations for transparency and inclusivity, significant and regular engagement with the community that both asked for feedback and provided updates. But perhaps the most important piece of this is the project design actually changed based on the input. And so, yes, if you're a project proponent and you think you've got the best plan and it's not your intention to go out there and have people change that plan, and I'm not enough of an engineering and traffic expert to tell you what the perfect answer was on this project. What I will say is, if there are ways where, or if there are contexts in which significant community feedback comes through, which you're able to address by making a material change to the project, that builds a lot of trust in and of itself. And so I'm not suggesting that you put water in your wine for the sake of engagement and keeping stakeholders happy exclusively, but it is a noteworthy and meaningful trust building exercise when you're able to do that and meet people's objections with meaningful action. And so that to me stands out as sort of one of the really interesting success stories here. I think in this case it was adding one or two new roundabouts, and the ways in which the roads intersected changed as a result of community feedback. And people are driving on these in Regina today, and it seems to be working very well. The next one here is St. John drinking water project. In this case, again, very strong public engagement, very transparent efforts to talk to the whole community. I think in this case, the challenge, if I got hired to come in and say, what are we going to run into as an issue here with the public that we have to address up front? I think the biggest thing is water rates and the financial impact on individual taxpayers. And so that's always going to be a sensitive topic. But in this case, because ratepayers were going to be directly paying for the new taking on additional risk and then taking on additional cost later, explaining how and why those changes need to be made and the specific impacts on individuals at the granular level. So this is going to cost you $20 a month on your water bill. Being upfront about that is so much less painful politically than saying we don't know what the cost is going to be or you won't notice it and then people get their water bill. Almost all the time, the surprise and the lack of trust and the lack of transparency is the actual problem, not the $20. And so in this case, the city was very proactive about communication, was very proactive about explaining the financial model and the how and the why the rates were going to be impacted. And I'm not there on the ground to speak to it, but my understanding is the trust built through that process helped win support for this project, which of course now is complete. And we're not hearing regular political fallout on this issue anymore. Or sorry, we didn't ever hear that because of the way that the engagement happened. And finally, the North Commuter Parkway and bridge replacement in Saskatoon, another award-winning project here. I think one highlight for me in strong engagement with Indigenous communities was actually having the Métis and First Nation elders guide the process, and they were directly involved in the naming of the bridge. So that was a partnership that was built over time and strengthened through this process. And that's an emblematic and symbolic way of expressing that partnership. But I think to all parties in this project, something that's very meaningful and to me a real mark of success in terms of planning out the engagement and finding ways to make meaningful efforts to get to know and build relationships with all of the critical stakeholders. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our friends at EPCOR, who will dive into a little more detail on another case study.
Okay, thanks, Fraser. Appreciate the opportunity to walk through the Regina case study. My name is Annette, and my esteemed colleague Joe and I we're going to share some learnings from our P3 experience, particularly at the Regina site. And we really hope to demonstrate some of the theory and action that we've talked about in this episode today. So if you're not familiar with EPCOR, and we're 100% owned by the City of Edmonton, we proudly serve across, as you can see in the map here, communities across Canada and the US. We bring storm, drainage, water, wastewater, electricity, natural gas to both homes and businesses while staying deeply rooted in the communities where we operate. We've been involved in 12 water and wastewater P3 partnerships, most under a design, build, finance, operate, maintain agreement. And noted earlier to set the point, the P3s vary in order of magnitude. Regina is one of our largest to date, but we also operate, maintain, and in communities or in the Rockies, for example, in Alberta and beautiful Kananaskis country, or mining's tailings that we work with the British Columbia government at the Britannia mine. So bottom line, our goal with P3 partnerships is to deliver a turnkey operations staffed by employees who are attuned to our safety culture, shaped by robust learning and development programs and rooted in the community that we'll talk about a bit more. But let's get to the details of the Regina wastewater upgrade. So it's a DBFOM, or Design, Build, Finance, Operate, and Maintain. And EPCOR's role is the lead, the financier, and the operator. It's a 30-year, 611 million Canadian construction operations renewal, the financing and the utilities. Its purpose was to address capacity at the time and to grow with the City of Regina, but really to leave the legacy that it's a ready-to-run facility for handback. Really want to encourage you to read on the P3 website on the next slide. There's a great summary of delivering the clean and safe wastewater for a growing city. This is a great summary of the project. And more importantly, it talks a lot about how the City of Regina had a very comprehensive stakeholder engagement, and really reflects our commitment and their commitment to the collaboration, that transparency we've talked about, and the community engagement. So let's talk about the journey, this journey of partnership. And we're going to take from that earlier slide through those phases of the communication plan. And all of the case studies noted earlier that Fraser talked about certainly involve challenging, ongoing stakeholder engagement early in the planning phase, significant community involvement, Indigenous engagement, and those various mediums, tools, and techniques. But what we wanted to do with this case study today and talk about the Regina one is the transfer of municipal employees to the proponent and the engagement of unions in this circumstance. And our intent is to provide a perspective about a people-centered partnerships for change management and engagement, because it impacts those stakeholders like unions, like pension providers, like benefit providers, and of course the employees. So in our review, we're going to focus on the second to the fifth phase, from procurement to handback. And we really want to cover or touch on things you might be thinking about. And if we don't touch on it, please ask us in the Q&A session. Because some folks think about, how will the municipal employees manage during this? Will they be set up for success? And how are they appropriately cared for during that period from the municipality to the operator? And what did EPCOR do with this transition? And you might also be thinking about, how does ongoing engagement in employees maintain momentum over that 30-year operating term that we have in Regina? And really, how do you ensure that investment is operated, employees are retained, and they grow and they learn, and it's handed back with that knowledge, which truly gives the return on that investment of the taxpayer? Or how are communities engaged through that operating period? That goes beyond the regular communications that you're expecting, or those measures of performance and monitoring that you want to keep up. So to answer these, we'll touch a little bit on how EPCOR works hand in hand, and even today with the city, our employees and the community, to ensure at that time the smooth and respectful transition of employees. But before we review that, we can share what the City of Regina did, and they did so well in the planning phase that helped set this partnership up for success. So this first phase, and long before EPCOR was selected as a proponent, they laid the groundwork for success. And Fraser, he reiterated that. I can't echo it again, that their leadership in the planning phase was critical, not just in technical terms, but in how they engaged with the people and the community. And through their comprehensive needs assessment and their feasibility study, they ensured the project was rooted to the community priorities and the health of the environment. And their commitment was to have an inclusive customer engagement. They brought together citizens, municipal leaders, elders, unions, pension, benefit providers, and key employees. And that shaped that project's direction. And it wasn't, quite frankly, it wasn't just consultation, it was collaboration. And our observation and our advice to anyone who wants to undertake such a project is to form an integration team, or that project team, or whatever you want to call it, communications team during this phase. And have on that team, have that comprised of HR, labor relations, benefits, pension experts, IT people. And that's also in addition to those that are involved in the construction and the design phase. And you know, the city formed theirs, And that really ensured that the RFP reflected not only the needs of the facility, but the needs of the employees and those stakeholders. And it set the stage for a respectful and smooth transition. So by the time the RFP was issued in October 2013, the foundation was solid. And EPCOR was able to step into really a people-centered, transparent, and built for success process. So the procurement phase began with a clear vision, and it was the citizens voting to proceed with the P3 approach. And in May 2014, EPCOR, of course, was proud to be selected as the proponent. But what made this phase successful, and building the right team is the theme here, was not just the paperwork, but the people. And key was the joint formation of a unified partnership team of both EPCOR and the city. And we brought together labor relations, HR, benefits, pension owners, IT, communications, and we brought together integration leads. And Kerry touched on this, where we facilitated the forthcoming changes both externally and internally within our customers so that we worked collaboratively, we spoke with one voice, and we acted in a shared intention. And this integration plan focused on onboarding in a way that was thoughtful and the way that it was staged. And it helped employees understand what was changing, how it affected them, and how they could grow in the new structure. So I'll give you some examples. Some examples included how a skill assessment. What was it going to be like in the future operations? How was the modernization of the facility would impact their work? What technology was needed? What new processes were changing? And what learning plans would need to be developed? A different example, benefit options. Having a clear and concise information prepared for employees to understand how together with the city, this transition would manage their benefit support, and was key to us was to provide a consistent, honest information about what the transition meant for them and their families. So by July of 2014, EPCOR began managing the employees on site, even though they were still remain with the city staff until early of the next year. But this early involvement helped build trust, operational continuity, which is so important, and it laid that foundation for respectful and stage transition. So let's jump to the next phase. The next stage is the construction. The construction phase is underway. There's all these construction teams around. But, it wasn't just about building a facility. It was about building trust. Because there's two ways we could have approached the construction phase. One way is to have the construction at the site. They're busy building the facility. They're commissioning it. They're starting it up. They're getting it ready. And then they hand it over to operations. Or, and our preference was to engage employees right at the start of construction, enveloping them with the site expansion, immersing them alongside with the construction teams with that startup, with that commissioning, with that troubleshooting. And this engagement aligns with our approach to involve, to learn, to grow employees along the way as early as often as possible. So our onboarding approach with employees was also staged and supportive. We wanted to preserve things that were important to them, vacation balances. We wanted to avoid payroll interruptions, and in many cases, improve their benefits. So we didn't take the approach to just move people. We celebrated their history with the city, and we welcomed them into EPCOR with care and respect. Our partnership as well with the union was key, because during this time, these employees were involved in a large outside worker union agreement together. And then working together with employees and QP, we developed a site-specific agreement that made sure that we preserved their employee status, their terms, that ensured the operational continuity, stability, and quite frankly, an agreement that was reflective to the work that they were doing at the plant. So we feel that this phase shows that infrastructure projects can and should be people-centered. It's how we build trust, we retain the talent, and we deliver on long-term value. So let's move to the next phase, and it's where we are today with the Regina facility. It's the operations and maintenance phase. And I want to hand this over to Joe, and he'll talk more about it.
Thanks, Annette. Yeah, so by this stage, the integration leads from EPCOR and the City of Regina had done their job and stepped back to let the local management team take the reins. So basically, Annette passed the torch on to me as the operations manager. And so from here on, it was about keeping things running smoothly and staying connected. I did that for almost 10 years before moving into a new role. So Annette left me with strong communication lines in place between EPCOR, city administration, council, regulators, and our union partners. Everyone knew who to talk to, when, and how. We developed regular touch points, clear reporting structures, and communication plans that kept everyone informed and aligned. A lot of the systems that we used were already outlined in the original agreements between EPCOR and the city, and so we developed them in the previous phases, but we refined them with input from stakeholders to make sure they worked in practice and not just on paper. The city also wanted to be sure the facility was being operated and maintained to the standards that they expected. And EPCOR was committed to showing that not only were we going to meet those standards, but we often exceeded them. So me and my team developed dashboards and KPIs, key performance indicators, to make it easy to track this progress and share updates with all stakeholders, including the city. And we didn't just say that things were going well, we had to prove it. So repeat annual ISO audits for quality and environmental performance show 0 non-conformances. This gives the city much more confidence in how the facility is being run. It's somebody external to us that's checking in on our performance and reporting back. So these external audits were no small feat, and the team takes a lot of great pride in the success of them. So we're now 11 years into a 30-year contract, and the city continues to be a strong supporter of the project. They even provide positive references for EPCOR on other projects and on the P3 model as a whole, which speaks volumes about the strength of the partnership and the excellence that we bring every day. Next is about investing in people and community. So this phase is about strengthening our team and deepening our roots within the community, and Annette touched on this earlier. So one of the first big milestones was the formation of CUPE's Local 7667, which was a new local created by the employees themselves, separate from the very large city local where they were a very small part of it. They were only a few dozen people in a union of over 1,000 people. So it gave them much more bargaining power, and it really allowed them to fully transition into EPCOR culture. Since then, we've negotiated collective agreements that go beyond what they had before, things like more personal leave, personal spending accounts, incentive pay, and much, much more. With solid management plans in place, developed during the procurement and construction phases, our learning and development teams, health and safety, and other support groups got to work. These groups are part of EPCOR's deep bench of over 2,000 water professionals across North America. Those people include certified operators, tradespeople, engineers, and lab staff. And the Regina employees transitioned into those 2,000. What's unique about our model and why we believe we have such great success in the P3 space is how we share knowledge across sites. So employees in Regina can take on short-term assignments elsewhere, so throughout North America, or we host visiting staff in Regina to come and learn from us and teach us things. So it's these mentor-mentee relationships that are a two-way street. Everyone learns something new. It's a powerful way to grow expertise in an industry where local teams are often very small. Usually only a handful of people operate a water or wastewater system in a community. And just as important as the technical skills is community connection. Our employees are active in the places they live. They volunteer, support local causes, and represent EPCORs in ways that matter. Our team in Regina is regularly involved in community initiatives, including support for the United Way, where EPCOR matches funds at a corporate level. We do environmental cleanups, we've done youth education initiatives, sustainability causes, and we have Indigenous partnerships. But one of my favorites is the EPCOR Helping Hands grant, where if an employee spends 30 hours or more volunteering in a community annually, and this can even be coaching your kid's hockey team, EPCOR will donate $300 annually to the charity or the nonprofit of your choice. So what all these things mean is that eventually when we hand the facility back, the city won't just get a well-run facility. They'll get a team of people who are trained to EPCOR's award-winning safety standards, have grown through our development programs, and are already embedded in the community. So next, as we look ahead to the handback in 2044, our focus is on making sure the city receives a fully operational, high-performing facility and a team that's ready to keep it running that way. That's the kind of legacy we want to leave behind. EPCOR and the city are already working together to achieve this and plan the transition. We're organizing all of our systems, data, and records so that everything's clear, accessible, and ready to go. Throughout the contract, we've kept operations up to date. We routinely implement new tools. We monitor cybersecurity continuously, and we modernize employee training and review it annually. Our performance reporting is transparent, and our extensive list of internal and external audits not only demonstrate our excellence, but allow us to continuously improve, which is what it's all about. The real legacy, though, will be the people. The city will inherit a team that's trained to EPCOR's high safety standards and operational standards, and has benefited from our learning and development programs, mentorship, and is deeply embedded in the community. That's what we want to see by a turnkey operation. Not just the infrastructure, but the expertise, continuity, and trust. So, the Regina project shows what's possible when you combine thoughtful planning, strong partnerships, and a commitment to people through the various phases of a P3 project. Next slide, please. So when the time comes to hand back this facility in 2044, the city is going to receive more than a well-run plant. They're going to inherit a team that's trained to our standards, culture, learning, and community engagement. So thanks for the opportunity and allowing us to share our story. We're very proud of what we've accomplished in Regina as a team, and we're excited about what's possible in future partnerships. So if you'd like to learn more, collaborate, or just continue the conversation, Annette and I and the rest of the EPCOR team are always here. Thanks.
Thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. And for those that don't know me prior to doing this, way back when I started in this industry, I worked on the communication side at a little known organization called PPP Canada. So it was really nice to kind of relive through Fraser and the EPCOR team some of the P3 Canada Fund projects that I touched on back in the day. Maybe if I can ask all of you guys to come on screen, I'll just remind folks that we will be taking questions. So if there are any questions, you've got the Q&A function at the bottom, and I can feed those to participants. But I've got a couple of my own, if that's okay, guys, while we wait for others to come in. And the first one, maybe I'll start with you, Fraser, but anybody else who has something, please, feel free to jump in. But I think, Fraser, as you were talking, I think especially since you've touched stuff at all levels of government, are there specific considerations or things that you encountered that just hit a little different in the municipal sector compared to projects that were procured by other levels, and things municipalities need to be aware of in those circumstances?
So anyone at the political level, and frankly, anyone in a senior level in any job, hates surprises. So that's the common thread. I think what is more often the case at the municipal level because of the work that they do, it's generally operational questions. For those of you who are municipal members here, like, I don't need to tell you, there's no municipality that thinks it has enough resources or funding or staff to do all the things it's doing today. And so how things are going to impact them on an operational level, both through the change on the project and, what new things have to happen once the project is complete. At the granular level, those operational questions seem to come up a lot and are certainly something that people have to be sensitive to, much more so than at the provincial or federal level, where people aren't really thinking about granular level operational questions.
And maybe that's just on the granular level, and maybe I'll kick it to you, Annette, or Joe on this. I mean, I think we think about sort of the upfront communications, as the project's underway. But what I thought, and you focused on sort of the two phases and the O&M, but there's multiple phases involved. So how do you think through sort of that transition? Are there different, as you've got new people? We talk about it a lot through the procurement process. The people at the beginning aren't necessarily the people through the O&M phase on the actual project delivery side. So how do you kind of keep that people in the loop as you get ready for each next phase?
Joe, I'll take. We think about how in each element people's roles will be evolving. And do they have, what skills do we need to support them with? What people do we need to support them with? Other roles shifting, splitting, adapting. So for us, we look at an end-to-end component, and whether there's people, process, or technology is our theme, to understand where is it going to impact them the most and what kind of advanced time that we need to prepare them for. So often we take operations teams on, and for a lot of them, it's just staging, keeping that change manageable while all those other things are occurring around them. Joe, anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Keeping the change manageable, Annette. So I was new to the Regina project and EPCOR as a whole when the Regina project was starting up. So I was one of the people actually that Annette was integrating onto the project. And then it was my role as the manager to kind of flow that down to the different employees as well. So I have an interesting perspective of that. And I really appreciated the fact that we weren't overwhelmed all at once. We took our time. It was very strategically thought out and well executed. And I think that's what made it so successful.
And this is, I know it's, they're long-term contracts, but part of what we're also thinking about at the council and with our membership is the projects that are getting ready to come, to hand back as they reach the end of the contract as well too. Is that something that you guys are thinking about now? Not just operationally, but in terms of the communications as well too, or you kind of keep it tucked in the back of your head, and see how things go?
It's a, I guess I'll start, Annette.
Yeah.
I think it's an ongoing conversation we're always having.
Mhm.
What does this look like? How are the employees and the various stakeholders? Where are we at in the process, and how much longer until the end? And what is that going to mean? And how are we going to turn it all back over to the city? And that's inclusive of employees in a lot of cases. So these employees, they live, they work. These are their communities, and so in all likelihood, they're going to want to stick around and continue to be members of that community. So.
I would also add too, the stakeholders surrounding the operations also want to understand what is the handback plan, what's the city's initiatives once they regain ownership. Does that affect them downstream of the plant? So keeping them informed as well, a part of the entire investment that the city has done is, we talk about it, I think, the entire process through all of those 5 phases.
Kerry, I might put you on the spot with this one, and then we've got a couple in the Q&A, and again, anybody else feel free to jump in. But just in terms of the importance of communicating, whether it's internally, as Annette and Joe are talking about, in terms of the staff and operational, or publicly, do you think the understanding or the acceptance of P3s and other ways of doing things is changing over time, or do you think there's still quite a bit of education to be done?
I think there needs to be a bit more education that needs to be done, I would say. I know like within the water industry, when we are kind of contemplating P3 models for infrastructure, though, the one understanding is that P3s are for much larger infrastructures and they don't apply to smaller, less than, call it $100 million projects that typically water infrastructure is kind of below that threshold. So I think that education still needs to happen, and that is part of engaging different municipalities and seeing how it can work.
Fraser, is that sort of your experience as well too, across sort of the spectrum?
Yeah, very much so. I think, you know, at the end of the day, there's no such thing as too much transparency. There's obviously you can over-index on reports and report writing and things like that, but people have, you know, are continually raising the bar and continue to expect lots and lots of transparency now. And so, you know, that's consistent over my years of doing this is very much in line with what Kerry said, but also I think the bar is going to continue to rise.
I think it's also going to be interesting too how you can kind of you have to continue to deal with that balance of openness and transparency and the municipal sort of process happening a bit more in a fishbowl than other levels of government. And so how do you sort of balance that transparency with the protection of certain pieces of information, whether they be proprietary or commercially confidential? So I think that's always going to be a bit of a trick that needs to be kind of talked through, I would think, as well. On city council approvals, I do have a question in the chat, just in terms of the stakeholder group dealing with restrictions or limitations that may exist from the stakeholder. So, as an example, dealing with seeking city council approvals and how those were dealt with. Maybe I don't know, Annette and Joe, given that you're sort of hands-on with the project, if there's any sort of, you would have to deal, I would assume, through the city officials for anything that would need to go for city council's approval rather than directly, I would guess.
That's correct. That's correct. The joint partnership team, there was the integration lead did have that conduit to city council. And if there was I don't recall that we had anything we had to go back to council to, aside from progress reports. But that would be that role of that integration lead to facilitate that change. And it certainly is helpful. They're embedded in that group. They understand the needs and the requirements and can establish that requirement back to city council for approval.
And how often would you go back to city council with progress reports?
Early in the construction phase, it was quite regular. Joe, you'd have to speak to how often we're touching base now with council today.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I believe it's still annually. So every year, our stakeholder, the administration, who looks after our contract with the city, they put together a report with our assistants and they present that. We go to city council not to be the presenter of the report, but to support the city administration in presenting it to city council and asking any questions. So yeah, to answer your questions, it's currently annually or greater if there's a need for it, but at minimum annually.
Great. That's come to the end of our questions. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. I think there's always a lot of focus on projects in terms of shaping them and structuring them to attract the competition in the private sector, but the communication side of these projects is also so critical. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time and coming to talk about your experience and opportunities. And I would say to the audience that, if any questions come to mind a little bit later, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We can always follow up with this group and get you the answers that you need. Just a reminder for everyone, a huge thank you to all of you for attending today, but I'll put the slide back up just in case you missed it at the beginning. You can download our municipal digital tool tools at the QR code. I think there's also a link in the chat as well too, if you're interested. Another special thank you again. I said it at the outset, but I can't say it enough, to be honest, to our session sponsors, Amico, BLG, EPCOR, Fasken, Graham, and Mainline. Your generous support has helped make this series possible, and I think it's been a fantastic endeavor by the council. So this is not the end of the discussion from our view. The webinar series may be wrapping up. This is the 6th of 6, but work continues on our end. So we will be working collectively with the advisory group to gather the insights from the webinars and help shape the next steps for the group's work. And that's really to ensure that our efforts continue to reflect the needs and the priorities of municipalities across Canada. Looking ahead, we're building on this momentum as we continue into the rest of 2025 and our programming and work plans. And it's been a fantastic opportunity through this webinar series. We've reached, I think, over 400 live viewers and even more for those who have gone back to our YouTube site and watched the webinars afterwards. So it's, we're going to continue to sort of build on this and see what we can do the rest of 2025 and moving into 2026. So what does that mean? That will look like more ongoing engagement, expanded thought leadership, and continued integration of our municipal work in with the council's provincial and federal policy work as well too. So, we continue to recognize that municipal voices are critical as we advance our policy development and infrastructure innovation nationwide. Just as a reminder to everybody, before we go, registration is now open for P3 2025, Canada's Infrastructure Conference, taking place in Toronto, October 27th and 28th in downtown Toronto. This is, our must-attend event every year. It will feature sessions that will also be tailored to municipalities, and exploring some of the big ideas shaping Canada's infrastructure sector. In particular, we've got some workshops that I think that will be of interest, as well as municipal sessions focusing on, the opportunities and the challenges at the municipal level in delivering new housing and enabling infrastructure. We encourage you to enjoy the conversation and connect with your peers across the sector live in Toronto if you're able to join us. And if you have any questions, ideas, or speaker suggestions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're always looking for new ideas and introduction to new speakers. Until then, thank you everyone for coming today and for participating over the six-part series. And a huge thank you to our Municipal Engagement Advisory Group for all of the work they put into the development of the tools and this series. It's very, very much appreciated. The council couldn't do it without you. And until then, everyone, thank you so much, and we'll see you all soon.